Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm speaking to you from the Centre Culturel Irlandais in Paris. I'm delighted to present as part of our programme a guided tour of Invisible Light, an exhibition which is currently on show in the Crawford Art Gallery in Cork City. And I'm delighted to be with the artists, Cleary and Denis Connolly, collectively Connolly Cleary, normally Paris-based artists, but who've been confined almost in the gallery itself for the past month. And so Anne and Denis are going to present 7 newly commissioned works, some of which were completed in the Centre Culturel during the summer. So we had the opportunity of seeing them while they were almost complete. And so a warm welcome to everybody joining us. Bon appetit to those in Ireland and also to those joining us from the US and the UK and Canada. And thank you. I'll hand over now to Anne and Denis. Thank you.
Thank you, Nora. I'd just like to express a big thanks to the Centre Culturel for inviting us to do this talk, but also for giving us the space to build this exhibition this summer at the Centre Culturel in Paris. We couldn't have done it without your help. And so here we are sitting in the empty Crawford Gallery with our new exhibition, Invisible Light. It was installed in early October to open on the 7th of October, but Ireland went into full lockdown the day before, and so it stayed closed to the public since, and we've been in here pretty much every day doing guided tours to schools and to other groups. And it looks like now the exhibition, well, the space will open next week, but the exhibition will be finished. So Denis, would you tell us a little bit more about the theme?
Yeah, so just despite this misfortune, we were very fortunate to be able to present it in this way on Zoom and on lots of other platforms online. And we've been doing that right through the show. And today we're very happy to present it to the Irish Cultural Centre, and also to have on board several of the scientists that we worked with, some of whom are tuned into this. I'll just begin by explaining the premise of this exhibition, which is called Invisible Light. As visual artists, we generally work with the visible part of the spectrum. In this exhibition, we want to go beyond the visible, on both ends of the visible spectrum, beyond the violet and beyond the red, into the vast zone of light that's invisible to us in the universe. Now, in order to visit these zones, we can't use our habitual tools as artists, our cameras and our recording devices and all the artistic tools that we're used to. We need to use Geiger counters and thermal cameras and spectroscopes and UV lamps and
infrared cameras
and X-ray machines even. Yeah. None of which we've any experience before of working with, and all of which demand a lot of expertise and a whole culture behind scientific culture that we simply don't have access to. So in each case, we worked with a scientist who introduced us to that culture and who helped us develop the piece with the particular technology. And as you're going to see, every piece followed its own path and brought us to very, very different places, very different scales, very different, very different language, very different things. So as we visit the show, we're going to explain more about the people we worked with and about the ideas that we explored.
And just before we actually go and look at the actual works, I think it's important to say that all these types of radiation are actually light. They travel at the speed of light. They have similar amplitudes, similar wavelengths to light. They are a form of light. They're just invisible to our eyes. The reason we're interested in working with this is because light is what tells us everything about the universe. Visible light can tell us about the world we see, but invisible light tells us about everything else, about the cosmic microwave background at the very end of the universe. It tells us...
Or the very beginning of the universe, depending on how you look
exactly. At it. It allows us to look inside our bodies, to look down into the earth, to look up in space.
See at night.
See at night.
Yeah. So the first thing that you see behind us here is this sphere, this inflated sphere, which is much bigger than it looks, and I'm just going to run back just to give you an idea of just how big it is.
So that's Denis. He's actually carrying the cosmic microwave background on his back. So shall we go and have a closer look at this piece, and Denis can tell us a little bit more about it.
So it's always been a sort of obsession of mine, particularly the cosmic microwave background, because it's the oldest light in the universe. And it comes to us as invisible light. It comes to us as microwaves. And these microwaves are probably about 7 centimeters long. They're completely invisible to our eyes, but we have telescopes like the Planck telescope and the Hubble telescope before it in space, which can detect this microwave background. And the importance of it is that it's our only evidence of the beginning of the universe. So we call this piece Sacred Relic, because it is the light that comes from the very beginning of time. Although, in fact, it comes from a little bit after the beginning of time, because the beginning of time is in total blackness. So this is the first moment that the universe began to glow, 380,000 years after Big Bang. Now, in order to understand what we've done, you have to imagine that we're looking at this sphere from the very center, that the Earth and the Planck telescope are at the very, very center of this sphere. And as we look out into space, we're looking back in time. So when we look 10 light years away, we're looking 10 years ago. And when we look a million light years away, you might see a galaxy a million light years away, you're looking a million years ago. So you keep on looking out, and the further you look out, the further back in time you look. And eventually, you look so far out in space that you come to the beginning of time. You come to 13.7 billion light years away, and you come to this, which is the first glow of the universe. And beyond that, we can see nothing. Just there's only blackness. And beyond the blackness of the first 380,000 years, there's just nothing. So this is the horizon of our universe, if you like, if you want to consider it spatially. But in terms of time, it is the beginning of our universe, or the beginning of our visible universe. And what we see here, it was given to us by the European Space Agency. They were the ones whose telescope, the Planck telescope, which is in orbit, took all this information and took several years to scan in every direction the radiation coming from here, which is very low, very weak level of radiation. It's a very low temperature. I think it's only about 3 degrees Kelvin, isn't that right?
That's right. Could you tell us what these different variation patterns represent?
So this is a heat map. So I said that there's around about 3 degrees Kelvin. Around about means that this is the hotter part and this is the cooler part. But there's very, very little temperature difference between the two. I think it's in the order of 0.02 degrees.
It's actually 0.00002.
Right. Okay.
Zeros.
Okay. 4 zeros and then
very tiny
of a degree. Yeah. And all of that at around about 3 degrees above Kelvin. So a very, very cool light. Now, to understand why it is that because this represents a time of when the universe was very hot and very dense. In order to understand how it cooled down and how it became invisible, you have to understand that light has been traveling for 13.7 billion years. And as it's traveling through expanding space. As the space expands, the wavelength of the light stretches out. And eventually it stretches out, so it goes beyond the red end of the spectrum and even beyond the infrared part of the spectrum and into microwaves. And that's how it comes to us at about 7 centimeters long, which is very long by comparison to visible light. So we call this the Sacred Relic. because this is our one true relic of the beginning of time.
Well,
So we're going.
This is a model of the Sacred Relic.
No,
I don't think we could actually get outside it. And
she's lying. It's the real thing.
shall we go and look at microwaves?
So we're going to go and look at X-rays. I
Sorry,
think
X-rays, excuse me.
we've been looking at microwaves. Yeah.
So this is our artwork relation to X-rays. And if we go a little bit further away, Denis, you can see that it's three large panels that are made up of X-ray photographs of the human body. And for us, these are quite fragmented bodies, actually. What was interesting about it for us is we'd intended to make this work of art this spring past of 2020 in Cork, working with Tyndall and using an X-ray machine here, and we would intend to look at natural objects, walnuts, flowers, things like that. However, that wasn't possible. We couldn't travel, and so we were in lockdown in Paris, and so we reached out to friends and family and asked them, do you have any X-ray photographs that you can share with us? And of course, many of them did. It was an incredible response that we got. So a lot of people photographed their own X-rays or posted them to us. And we had this huge collection in the end of over 300 photographs. And so we put together these bodies, these figures. And what's interesting about them is that they're full of personal stories. So everybody who sent us their X-ray, they accompanied the X-ray with the story of what had happened. You know, I fell off my bicycle, or I was concerned that I might be ill in some way. Or there's one particular poignant story in this, which is the story of our dear friend Lucy, Lucy Dixon, who's a dancer. And Lucy had a problem with her hips, and she couldn't dance for several years. And so this was a big trauma for her to have to get both her hips replaced. Shall we go closer and we look at one of
tell us about the colour as we're going closer.
Color. So as you can see, it's very, very colourful piece. X-ray photographs are usually represented in white on black, and the reason for this is that it's very clear. I think the contrasts are very clear. However, there's no real reason why they should be in white on black. And so we thought, well, it's going to be a work of art, like a great big glazed window, something like that. And so it can be colourful, why not? And so we decided to keep the contrast, the opposites, but go with duotone. So each photograph is transformed into a very colourful duotone using contrasting colours.
Let's go and have a look. So what I noticed is that at the bottom we have lots of feet, obviously.
Yeah, the reason we got a lot of feet at the bottom is that we got a lot of radiograms from our dear female friends who've had problems with their feet. And so you find that women often of a certain age, mine included, have problems with their feet because of wearing silly shoes. And so at the bottom we've got an array of feet, and then going up further up we've got some knees, some hips, and you'll find that, in fact, once again, we've got a certain mix of ages here, and ages and also gender, because we've got both male and female appearing here. And as we go up further, we get younger and younger, interestingly, because when we get to the very, very top of this work, we've got a whole array of heads and skulls. And of course, skulls are very often, children often get their heads x-rayed for their teeth. They're getting orthodontic treatment.
Tell us about this particular hip.
This one here, it's not my favorite. Let's look at the blue one down that end.
Okay. And while we're on our way, we have this quite interesting photograph.
Here is a photograph of photograph of a hand, and this belongs to the mother of a very good friend of ours. And in fact, this lady was unable to take her ring off for this photograph, and so she left it on. And the interesting thing about this photograph is that it's an almost exact replica of the very, very first X-ray photograph, which was the wife of Röntgen, who discovered X-rays.
I'm going to show.
Röntgen.
I think I'm going to show that now,
just
so we can have a look at the. Just bear with me for a moment.
Okay, Dennis is looking for the photograph of Anna Bertha Röntgen's hand.
So this is Röntgen, who was the man who discovered X-rays, and how he discovered them was that he was working with a cathode tube, Crookes tube, which produces a ray of electrons, and the ray of electrons lights up one end of the Crookes tube. But what he discovered was that as well as the ray of electrons, there was an invisible ray that was going beyond the tube, and that was going into a cupboard that was beside the tube and exposing some photographic plates that he had. So he knew that if it was exposing photographic plates, it must be light, but he didn't know what it was, what sort of light.
It was invisible light.
It was an invisible light. So he called it X-rays, which kind of essentially meant, I don't know what they are rays.
They're still called X-rays.
Still called them, I don't know what they are rays. And the very first photograph that he took with this was by asking his wife to put her hand in one of the photographic plates.
So this is Annabeth Röntgen's hand, showing her knuckles and her ring. And we have the exact, a very, very similar replica right here, which was accidentally part of the artwork.
Okay, so
another
very traumatic one for me.
Yes, this is Denis's knee here, and about a couple of years ago, Denis actually fell off his scooter on the way to, a foot scooter by the way, on the way to the swimming pool, and he got back up and jumped back on his scooter, went to the pool, his legs seized up while he was swimming, and he came home and discovered that in fact he had a broken knee. So as
terribly
you can
painful.
see, this is a very personal work of art, and it's also full of human stories. So we're very, very pleased with the way this came together.
And we call this See Through Me. So
Next.
we might have a look at the other piece that we did with X-rays, which is opposite side of the room here. You're going to see another couple of pieces we'll see afterwards.
X-Renaissance, and in actual fact, it's a reproduction of a Renaissance artwork
by Ercole de Roberti.
That's right, Ercole de Roberti. So Ercole de Roberti was a very not a very well-known Renaissance painter, but his work is absolutely magnificent. And these particular two pieces were being restored as a Getty project. And where exactly
at the Getty Foundation. And in fact, they're in Germany. I think they're in Dresden.
Could we show the originals?
Yeah. Yes, let's have a look at the originals. So I'll go back to my presentation, and we'll look at, just bear with me for a moment while I find those. Okay, so here we are. So this is our collaborator, Veronica Bialcati, who when she was working at the Getty Foundation, she was working with XRF technology.
So that's X-ray fluorescent technology.
And the XRF technology allows you to use X-rays to recognize certain elements that there is in a painting. So these were the paintings. These are the two panels by Ercole de Roberti, which came originally from Bologna, but are now in Dresden, I think.
So the Garden of Gethsemane and the Ascent to Calvary.
And late 15th century. These were images that were taken of the two panels during restoration. So you can see how the varnish has been removed. They were extremely darkened by varnish, but you can see that some of the touching up of damage hasn't been done.
And so the artwork we have behind, they're what we call elemental maps of these original paintings. They're showing where certain trace elements are present in the paintings that would have been in the pigments and still are in the pigments. So
the red, for example, shows you where there's mercury. And the green shows you where there's copper, and the blue shows you where there's tin. And the advantage of this is that it allows us to know the sort of pigments that Roberti would have been using.
And we have some of these pigments here. So here, these are the original pigments that he would have used. We got them from a shop in Paris where they sell works for restoring artworks. And so this is Cinnabar, pure Cinnabar here. As you can see, it's just a tiny few grams, in fact, because this is extremely rare now.
And this contains mercury.
That's right, and it's also poisonous. So we had to jam the jar shut. Azurite, which has got copper in it.
Yes.
So it's a greeny blue, you can see, and once again, just a few grams here. And then we have yellow of lead and tin,
which contains tin.
Which contains tin. Yeah.
So the elemental maps help them to know the pigments that Roberti was using, and to distinguish the pigments from the varnishes, which were darkening the painting. So let's we'll have a look at the
banana music, shall we?
Yeah, I think yeah. Okay, let's look at banana. So one of the most challenging pieces that we did was with gamma rays. Gamma rays are the most obscure form of light that we took on, and simply because gamma rays essentially only come from nuclear reactions and nuclear breakdowns. So when a nucleus of a heavy atom like uranium is breaking down, it releases gamma rays. So a nuclear explosion, for example, would release a lot of gamma rays. We weren't allowed to make a nuclear explosion here in the gallery. A radioactive element like uranium or plutonium would produce a lot of gamma rays. Also a bit of a no-no in the gallery. But we did discover something quite common that has gamma rays, and that was the banana, which had a great appeal to us as artists. Banana has potassium in it, and the potassium in the banana produces a very small amount of gamma radiation. That small amount of gamma radiation can be detected by a Geiger counter. So what we did, I'll turn around now so you can see this, is we set up a table. You can see the table is based on the international symbol for radiation. And at the center of the table, there's one banana, and above it, there's the sensor of a Geiger counter. What we're going to do now is Anne's going to switch on the Geiger counter.
This is the Geiger counter here.
Maybe you might unplug the link to the computer at the bottom there first. Yeah. Okay.
So this is the Geiger counter here. It's not switched on. So I'm going to switch it on now. So now this is capable of detecting gamma radiation. However, it's got no input right now. So now I'm going to
you've unplugged the power as well.
Oh, well, I'll plug it back in again.
Yeah, okay. so plugging in the power.
Sorry.
Okay.
Right?
So you hear? Yeah, that's it.
That's
Now it's plugged in on both sides. Okay. So this is producing. We see that the Geiger counter is now receiving photons.
Quite a lot
from
of
the
photons, actually. So, well, it was a minute ago. When you see this little red light flashing there, that's emitted. That is tracing a photon that's been emitted from the banana.
Okay, so that's the Geiger counter receiving photons. Now what we're going to do is we're going to plug this into a computer, and the computer is going to create music out of this.
It's just stopped.
Uh-huh.
It often does this. You silly banana.
There we go. So this is a program that we created to sample Tibetan bowls and have them create a music based on the photons coming from the banana.
And what we liked about the Tibetan bowls is that in fact, when you hit a Tibetan bowl, it can give a very long a note actually that just descends and it just trails off of it, and there's a little sort of sense of a half-life to it. So a lot of these have different scales, but also different lengths, so that we can make a play of this kind of notion of the gamma being emitted and just fading away.
So that is banana music, a piece with gamma rays. So
ultraviolet.
We haven't looked at ultraviolet yet. Yes. So we're going to follow on.
This tent over here, this black tent you see, it's called the UV teepee, and it's made of black felt. Black felt is the most absorbing, light absorbing of materials, and we wanted something that would really make a dark space in here, very, very dark. And as you can see, it's a very, very bright gallery. So we built this summer out of this felt.
In the Irish Cultural Centre, very
nice
generous
and
help.
Soft and fluffy, a little bit like a kind of a great big overcoat or something like that. And inside we have a display of items that are fluorescent. Fluorescence is our only way of really visually understanding that ultraviolet is present. with our
So in
vision
our
system.
other pieces, we've used Geiger counters and X-ray machines, but in this one, we're using nature's way of showing us an invisible form of light, which is ultraviolet.
So if you want to come inside, and we'll have a quick look, but then we'll look at a film of this in that we filmed a few days ago, because it's actually very, very difficult. You need a very good camera. What we'd hoped is people would be able to come inside themselves and explore it with their own eyes. So here we're inside the tent, and as you can see, it's quite dark in here, and we have various items, and we also have this lamp, which is an ultraviolet lamp. It also gives up some light in the visible spectrum. And as we shine the light around, you can see that these items are fluorescing.
So I'm going to go to a film that we did previously, because the webcam here is not great for picking this whole thing up. I'm going to go to this. Just bear with me for a moment. And we have a previous day when Anne had a different dress on. So here we see the periwinkles that cover the floor of this teepee, and the extraordinary colors that you see in them. When we come back to us, we'll show you what they look like in daylight. And these extraordinary stones, which are called agate. Yeah.
So we picked up these minerals and stones in this incredible warehouse in Paris, which is full of all the different types of minerals you could possibly imagine. And we also got these amazing bits of fabric from Amalia Kent. She was just discarding these. They're fabrics that she would have, remnants of fabrics that are fluorescent that would have been used for fashion shows. And then, of course, we've got at the backdrop by Denis doing his Jackson Pollock, a very nice spattered artwork.
Call me Jackson.
So the idea is that people would just be able to come in here with their lamp and just really, really enjoy the delightful fluorescence of these objects, and then perceive ultraviolet because of that.
And if we come back to our space here, we can show you a little bit how what the periwinkles look like in normal daylight.
So this is what they look like. As you can see, they are definitely not pink. They're kind of beige and grey. Yeah. But they have these incredible fiery hearts. When you illuminate them with ultraviolet light, they've got these fiery hearts. It's quite extraordinary.
So the last piece we want to look at before we look at visible light, which we've also included, is to do with radio. And I'm gonna follow Anne over there.
The Radio Hat Workshop. And so you can see over here, there's a series of hats on display models. And these hats are actually radios. Many years ago when I was a child, I used to go to Connolly to stay with my granny. And my granny was a very frugal woman, and she had kept all these amazing magazines from the 40s and 50s so that we could enjoy them. And so they were quite quaint, there was Boy's Own magazine and some old Vogues and things like that, and they were quite beautiful. But I was fascinated by both. I was fascinated by the Boy's Own magazines, where it showed you how to make your own crystal radio or different, listening devices and things like that. I was also fascinated by the Vogues and the hats and the fashion in these magazines. And so when we had the opportunity to make an artwork about radio, I just felt really, that it'd be amazing to make hats that were radios that you could actually wear and listen to the radio at the same time. So what we did is we got these hat bases. They're called fascinators, and a fascinator is something that your aunt might wear when she's going to a wedding. And so we decorated the fascinators with actual radio working parts. Which is so interesting because they're beautiful things, copper coils of copper wire. This is a tapped coil here. You can see these little loops here will allow us to tune the radio using this crocodile clip. And then this other type of secondary coil here, which is a spider weave coil, but this also will help you to tune the radio. And then we have here a capacitor, but this capacitor is made of 2 sheets of aluminium, one which is aluminium fabric, so it's separated by frilly paper. So, and then we have our piezoelectric earphone here, which you can just plug in and you can tune in. So this is
and of course the germanium diode.
Oh yes, of course. I always forget. The diode is really a detector. It will allow you, it allows the current to pass from AC to DC and then be picked up by the earpiece, the sound to be picked up. So they're quite fascinating. So our idea was that this would be an ongoing workshop. A radio, in fact, has only 5 basic parts. It's got to have a coil, a capacitor, an antenna, an earth, and an earphone. So all of these radios have all these parts, but they're not fully connected up. If we look at this one over here, Denis, the red one, this one here is the most complete. It's got its antenna. It's got its antenna woven into the hat. And so if we connect this to Earth, we can actually, and listen to the earpiece, we can actually hear some radio signals being picked up. Just really a buzz and a crackle at the moment because there are no AM signals left. They're all FM. So nowadays, so we'll have to actually produce our own signal for this workshop to be fully complete.
Let's have a look at some of the elements that we built it out of.
Yeah, so the idea is that people could come in here and we'd have a table and all these items here and they can actually make their own radio hats. So we've got copper wire, various grades and electrical wire. We've got ribbon and we've got these amazing coils here that are from vintage radios that could be integrated. And then we've got tin foil that you could make capacitors out of. And we've got these other original vintage capacitors, which I really like. You can see how they you can adjust them like that. This little knob here. So that's the Radio Hat workshop, and it's just an artwork waiting to be completed by
this piece is lovely
its
too.
public. This, oh yeah, here we have a capacitor. That's a fan, so it's got 2 pieces of metal separated by some paper, and I was wondering, could we tune the radio by opening and closing the fan? I'm not sure if that's really going to work. So we'd like this piece to be completed eventually by the public, and so it's waiting to happen, and that'll be for another time. So
okay, so we've one last piece to look at, and that's to do with visible light. So visible light you might not expect to find in a show called Invisible Light, but we considered visible light from the point of view of animals and other ways of seeing visible light that, for example, a dog might see. So a lot of this is possibly the most fun part of the exhibition because we had to interact with a lot of animals, which was great fun. But we also we were able to do things with illusions. And I'll show you on my computer, a little bit more closely what that is. There's also a dichroic glass, a green dichroic glass, which reflects in magenta, while it shows everything through in green. And that should have been accompanied by a blue and a red dichroic glass. And next time it will be. And then we have a piece that would have been integrated into the same room, except for that COVID regulations demanded we spread things out a little bit more. And this is a kind of a way of collapsing 3-color trichromatic vision into dichromatic vision. So we've got various experiences which are really to do with what we understand of animal vision, what we as artists understand of animal vision, having conversed with people like Christoph, who's here watching this. So I'm gonna go now back to our presentation, so we can show you a little more clarity what that's all about. Just bear with me until I come to the visible part of this. So our starting point for the visible part of the spectrum is to make a room, and to make a room where we could create kind of conversations around color with animals. Now, obviously, animals can't talk to you, but we just found ways in which we could engage animals in some way with using color, capture their interest, and maybe elicit in some way what interests them most in terms of colors. As you may know, human vision is trichromatic, and this gives us quite a rich color landscape of primary and secondary colors, and also of luminance, so dark and bright colors, which we've got quite used to, a very subtle and rich landscape of colors. Now, if you were a dog, for example, you wouldn't have this sort of complexity and subtlety of color. It seems that all they see is blue and yellow in terms of color. Now, this would give them a much simpler color universe, and we had some conversations with various psychologists who suggested that blue and yellow will not mix to any other colors, and we also were intrigued by the possibility that what the animal sees, what the dog or the horse would see, would not be our way of seeing color by adding those different colors to each other, but by opposing them, by creating an oppositional thing between the blue and the yellow in this case. So one of the first things that we did was to create an interactive installation that looked back at the gallery and collapsed 3 colors into 2 colors, often using this kind of oppositional thing of one color being flipped to negative, while another color was switched off completely, and another color was left positive, and in that way creating a sort of dichromatic vision of the world, and exploring how that might be in some ways more clear and in some ways less clear than what we see, and in some ways much more dramatic and much more intense as a visual universe, and other times not. So this installation cycles through a continuous versions of possible chromatic worlds, starting with our basic 3 colors, red, green, and blue. So that was the second part of the thing. Would have started with when we saw this video of a cat interacting with an illusion, with a motion illusion, which had been designed by a Japanese scientist called Kitayuka, and Christoph Witzel, who's here watching this, when we spoke with him about this, he was amazed that the cat could see this, because they have such a different visual system. So this simple fact that we'd found common ground with cats with this illusion inspired us to create this as the floor of the room. We got in touch with Kitayuka, and we asked him, could we use his illusion? Could we create a variation of his illusion as a floor? As you can see, the way this illusion works is in your peripheral vision. You see these wheels as turning, as if they're snakes riding around, and as your eyes move around, they seem to turn more. So our room was made of a floor, is made of a floor that's of intertwined illusions, intertwined snake illusions. So, and our ambition was that we would bring animals into this room. It possibly wouldn't have been where it is now. It possibly was going to be down in the courtyard of the gallery.
That's right, or even in the square outside in front of the Crawford. There's the Opera House Square, and we had the idea that it might be quite nice to have this here and then just out there and allow people just to come with their dogs when they're walking their dogs. That would have been quite fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it was an ambitious idea that we'd involve animals, and this would be a kind of conversation with animals. And the title of this piece is The Animal Colour Debate. But unfortunately, times being what they are, people weren't allowed to come into the gallery, animals weren't allowed to come in either, and even the idea of creating an assembly of people outside the gallery on the square around this around this lino would have been outside the rules. So what we did instead is we brought the illusions to people who have pets that we know. This is Clandestine, and this is a dog called Pia, they both belong to friends of ours, and you could see the intrigue of the dog. Although he's quite intimidated, she ends up walking around to sit behind the illusion. You could see the way the orangutans, for example, came forward in a kind of very social way to get involved, but then were ultimately shy of it. You could see the way the guinea pig was terrified of it. And then we had other ways of conversing with animals as well, using coloured bowls, for example, and simply holding them up just to ask the animal, which one of these do you want to look at? Or shining lights in at fishes in aquariums, and a blue and a yellow light, saying, which one do you want to look at? And every animal seemed to respond in a kind of a characteristic way, and their body language was quite intense, really. And communicated with us what they were looking at. This is why we called it a debate. And the cats were obviously, in many ways, the most immediately communicative because they chase what they're interested in, what they think is edible. The orangutans were kind of philanthropic, but ultimately seemed a little underwhelmed by the whole thing. The dog was always interested in the yellow for some reason, as opposed to the blue, and perhaps because she considered the yellow as more edible than the blue. Ultimately, we eventually ended up in the going through all the animals in the zoo, many of whom didn't really engage with this particular debate that we proposed them, but some of whom, and the orangutans were always our favourite, engaged, even if they didn't appear to be very intrigued by the whole thing. And one of our favourites was Blanche-Neige, who was an ostrich.
She's beautiful. And what's really interesting about the birds is the way their heads are so graphic, the way they just move their heads like this. But
there's a kind of a body language.
Yeah, so you can tell exactly what they're interested in.
Yeah.
More in the green, of course, as usual. That makes sense. Green and yellow seem to be the colours.
Red seemed to introduce this particular word, and look at the body language of looking. It's quite intriguing. With the fish, they seem to be want to drink in the blue, particularly more than anything else that we could propose to them.
That makes sense, of course, because water would have a blue tinge often.
Yes, yeah,
The
and
sky
our green
coming
tinge.
down,
I think maybe the yellow was quite eaten up by the But sometimes it's quite intriguing the way they came back to kind of drink up and brew the wheat. So that's about where we want to leave you, and we come back to.
I'd like to thank everybody for coming along. That was just great to have you, people from all over Europe and even the United States with us today, and we'd like to thank Nora and the CCI and all their staff once again, of course, for helping us make this work, and the Crawford.
There's one piece that we didn't look at, in fact, and we didn't look at. I realise now, infrared. Maybe we should go over and have a look at that now.
Wow.
Yeah, because it just reminded me. You were saying that you were thinking the Irish Cultural Centre, and of course, this is one of the major pieces that we built in the Irish Cultural Centre. We sometimes forget things. So this was a piece that we made in the Irish Cultural Centre this summer. It's quite an experimental structure in a way, putting a circle inside a square to hold a square.
I particularly like the design of this screen, because this is a STEAM exhibition and we're interested in maths as well. And so there's a mathematical design. We have a circle.
Let's go around the side so we can see the
of polycarbonate with a square inscribed into it, and then that is inscribed into a demi-sphere. And so all of that is constructed from polycarbonate, which is like quite a very flexible material. So that was a bit of a headache to get that to come together.
Also involved us drilling a few holes in the walls of the Irish Cultural Centre. Sorry about that, Nora.
And the Crawford Gallery too.
This is the camera that we worked with, which was bought from the and I'm just going to go around the other side, which is bought by the French police. It was bought from the French police, who used it on a drone. I'm not going to ask myself what they used it for, especially considering the things the French police have been doing recently. But it's probably the most expensive piece of equipment here. Good IR cameras are quite expensive. The other thing that there is underneath, as I'm going to show you now, is
these little fridges. And well, this is a fridge and this is a heater, food heater. And in fact, in these we have these little items here that are pads, and this one is cold and this one is kept warm, but they look exactly alike to you, but in actual fact there is a very big difference in temperature. And when you see these in infrared, through an infrared camera, you'll see that this one is really, really black, whereas this is really bright white. So
and I'm going to show you that now, and we're going to go to my hard disk once again. We'll have a look at 3 little films that we made. So here is, on a previous day, a very rainy day, when I've been walking in the rainy streets of Cork, and you can see my feet are cold from that. Bring you back to so you can verify that. My feet are blue with the cold. My mask that I'm wearing, which I had to wear in the gallery that day, as I breathe in and out of it, is going lighter and darker. And my glasses appear to be sunglasses, because glass, as we discovered, is opaque to infrared. So you can also see various levels of insulation given by my clothes, and even the fact that I've got underpants on. And you can see Anne, who also walked in the rain.
I stepped in a puddle with one foot, you can see. So one of my feet is wet and cold there.
But you can also see the visor that she has on. I go to a second film now for this. We'll come back to that again. So these are the cold and the warm cabinets with inside them these compressors that are hot and cold. And the amazing thing is, even though they look exactly the same, they're in total contrast.
So you can see here the deep inky black of the cold one and the bright hot whiteness of the hot one. But actually what's interesting is that and these aren't really those colors, this is a sort of protocol that has been developed to represent cold and hot. I think we represent that way because that's what we're used to. We know that fire is hot and bright and white, and that colder deep sea is cold. So we represent them these ways.
But look at the way my hands are. One of them looks like it's glowing white, and the other looks like it's dirty.
Inky black.
Yeah. And now, of course, we discovered as well that the visors that we were wearing in the gallery, instead of masks, were even though they're very thin plastic, are quite opaque. And the only thing that makes any impression on them is our breath on them. The only thing that seems to get through of the face behind is your breath.
And so this is quite dramatic also with the masks. When you're wearing a mask and you breathe into it, and the face coverings, then it gets really, really bright hot. And we thought this would be really interesting if the exhibition had opened, that school children would be coming in and breathing into their masks, and their faces would be going on fire, which would have been a lot of fun. But it didn't happen.
So, in the end, we had a lot of ideas of props, that we would use ice and blow dryers and all sorts of things that we weren't allowed to use in the end. But in the end, the COVID gave us some of the most interesting things, these visors and masks, and even walking in the rain in Cork, giving us this particular variation. And just simply putting your hand against something that's darker, something that's more insulated, and looking at the way the thermal shadow fades away. So that's our
exhibition, isn't it?
That's pretty much everything, isn't it? Really.
Sit down again, and
yeah, we might
one last walk through the space, and under the cosmic microwave background, which of course you can never see from the outside, because we're inside this great big globe.
Past the radio hats.
Past the visible space. This has been our little work post for the last 7 or 8 weeks. We've just been sitting here introducing people to the exhibition visually.
Looking at the empty streets.
Yeah.
So that will, let's say thank you very much. And
well, we'd like to thank the Irish Culture Centre, and we'd like to thank Crawford Art Gallery, and we'd like to thank Tyndall National Institute and Science Foundation Ireland and the European Space Agency and all those other amazing people that have helped us make this exhibition.
And thank you for coming along today to see this presentation. I hope you enjoyed it. So we're signing off now.